Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back down the rabbit hole. I am your host, Monty Hook, and today I'm joined online by a very special guest, Mr. Tom Carroll. Tom, how are you?
Yeah, good, Monty. Yourself? How you doing?
Very well, thanks. Whereabouts are you? You're in Sydney, or you live in Sydney these days?
Yeah, I'm just on northern beaches of Sydney. Really lucky to be able to sort of call this place home. Yeah, very, very fortunate. I've been here all my life, so. I'm just born into here and still here.
Beautiful. So, look, for those of you who don't know who Tom Carroll is, Tom Carroll is a two-time world champion surfer, 3 times pipeline master. I'm actually a bit of a surfing fan myself, and it's really interesting because I grew up bodyboarding. I discovered the ocean when I was about 13 years old, and it actually, redirected my life. Gave me an outlet for, I could have very easily become a criminal and, had a lot of bad behavior when I was young, and the ocean really corrected me. And I was a bodyboarder, and I had one poster on the wall of a surfer, and this was back in probably 1992, and it was you, and it was this iconic shot of you doing a snap under the lip at Pipeline, I think. If I remember correctly, it's like a pink board, and that poster, I had a big spread poster, and it was probably 92 but I think that shot was probably somewhere in the late 80s, right? So you won the world championship in what, 80, 83 and 84?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really special for me to have one of my childhood heroes on the podcast.
Cool.
Did you ever get used to being like an icon for people? Is that still kind of weird?
It's lovely recognition. It can be sort of just on that sort of, from my perspective, I'm just still a person that has to get up in the morning and go to the toilet. Hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully that event happens, because you want that to happen, right? So I'm just, and my daughters will tell you what I'm really like, and my partner. So, it's still that way, and but it's really cool being able to touch a lot of people. Just by the pure act of riding a wave. It's like blowing me away. Like that kind of is amazing, and people get really excited about that sort of that you've done something. And I think that goes for us all when we see someone do something with genius. You see someone, you hear that you can't not sort of sink into what's happening, kind of in that moment. Say someone who's performing something like, playing an instrument really beautifully, like a violin, or someone who's playing a piano really beautifully, or someone who's dancing beautifully, someone who's just created just beautiful art, or surfing a wave beautifully, or to a standard that's very high. You kind of almost go with them doing it. You almost sort of do it with them, and they are sort of are doing it and sort of permeating the space. So having that, and then that lifts their spirit, so you feel that. And when it comes back in all these many different forms, so many different people around the planet, and kind of all of a sudden start coming with kind of their perspective of it. So it's beautiful. I was like, it's such a beautiful thing to be able to lift people's spirit just by just going out there and loving what we do. Like, I think there's no higher kind of state, really.
Yeah.
So I love talking to people, love seeing people get excited and get happy just because I've signed something. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And but I kind of take it with a grain of salt because, I still, like I said, I've got to get up in the morning and hopefully go to the toilet.
Yeah. But I mean,
if that event doesn't happen, I'm really just like you. If you got, what I mean, I'm not. I'm constipated. Oh, damn. Sorry.
No, that's good. So you've got a you've got a really interesting story in terms of your, history as an athlete, and then, you're very publicly spoken out about drug addiction, and now you've really found meditation, and this is something that you're doing something somewhat professionally, helping people with meditation. So, to be able to turn that journey into something, very inspirational and actually very, very helpful for the planet right now is a really powerful, thing to have done. So I commend you on that. And that's, part of why I've been following you for a long time, mostly because of the surfing, but then, to see what you're up to now in the world, helping humanity with, what's important, which is, connecting to themselves and connecting to presence. I don't think there's any more powerful thing that you can do. So, it's really powerful. So, do you mind me asking a little bit about your, your surfing career? And this is just the surfing nerd in me. Just want to get some of the questions out of the way, and then we can go into the deeper stuff. But one thing that kind of occurs to me is that these days, professional surfers, like, they're full on athletes, like they're getting up at 5 a.m. and they've got these routines and, supplements, and they're doing gym and they're doing all sorts of different trainings and stuff. But I don't think it was like that back in your era, right? Back in the late 70s and especially through the 80s. I mean, surfing back then was kind of like a thing that bums did, right? And it took a long time, I think, for it to really gain that acceptance into it being a real sport. So what was it like for you being an athlete back then?
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on there in that question, but well, my experience, like, I definitely, when I was a kid, surfing was something that I loved, like, almost immediately. Like, I was, first of all, I was given a surfboard by my mum, who was just about to pass away. And she gave me the board, and then, then all of a sudden I was riding this board in the ocean, and the ocean gave me a place to sort of try to figure what the hell went on just then, So it was sort of a very deep connection to the ocean started to happen as a result of that event in my life. So, and I didn't really I wasn't aware of that at the time, but it was all happening. And lo and behold, I was just sort of made to, my physical and mental application with the ocean. It was just sort of, kind of a nice little marriage. And I just gave myself completely to it. That was in my nature. So I, once I started looking, you start as a kid, you just start looking towards, what's attractive, where I want to go, and you just start seeing, surfing magazines and all that sort of stuff, and you start, and you get information from different sources, and you kind of generally just basically want to study it because it's basically all I wanted to do because I was so frothed up on it. I was just I just loved it, and it was a hell of a lot better than the classroom, I tell you, at school. But even though I was attending school and I wasn't allowed not to go to school, my father would make sure I was going to school every day, and not like a few of my friends who were able to kind of skip and stuff and tell me how good the surf was. But during those times when I sort of started to branch out and reach towards, competition, it was just sort of like a rite of passage to do that. I don't think I was a natural competitor. It took me a while to figure that out. But watching the sport sort of come out of the 70s, where it wasn't really, I came into it as it was kind of a rebellious sort of thing. It was more like a counterculture, and you're just a surfy bum, like you said. It was just, and that was really counter to my experience while surfing. I was like completely, so when I was looked down upon as someone who was less than, as just because I got a surfboard underneath my arm, it was very much like, hang on, there's a little bit of something miss here in people's minds about it. As I got more recognition as a good surfer, I got better at competition, and there was no real, like you said, there was no application mode, like in in set ways. There was, the local competitions in club competitions. Then there would be the area competition. There was a state competition. There was a New South Wales, the national competition. There was a world amateur title up for grabs, and I started to get sort of more privy to all this sort of stuff going on, and there were these beautiful photographs of waves in Hawaii, and there's amazing surfers doing this amazing stuff, and some surfers were actually winning and getting making what looked like they were making a living out of it. I didn't know at the time. I just didn't know, but it looked like that was, God, that looks like a good thing to do. Maybe I could do that, because I didn't know what I did want to do. You're like 14, 13, 14, 15, 16. And what do you want to do when you get older? I don't know. I thought the sensible thing to do was to get a trade, because I wasn't going to keep going with school, because I wanted to be able to compete in surfing. So I got out at year 10 and started working on cars, of all things, as a trade to get, because I wasn't quite sure that I was going to make a living surfing. I just didn't know. But lo and behold, that work that I worked 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, at a local car shop where we were fixing cars up, and I got to learn a bit of that trade. I just learned exactly what I didn't want to do. And there was no such thing as when you went to a surfing competition that you kind of warmed up for your heat. You didn't do the only warm up would be surfing. And there was no such thing as nutrition, nutrition was just meat pies and
Milo,
stuff like that. Very basic fish and chips, stuff like that, hamburgers, and it was pretty much available anyway. So stepping beyond that, there was a time when I got to a point where I was doing really well in competition. I had a lot of recognition, and there was especially on my first trip to Hawaii when I was 16, I was heard maybe it's a good idea to do some swimming before you go to Hawaii to get yourself in condition to go to Hawaii. And that sort of came into the fold for about 2 months before my first trip to Hawaii. But also at the same time, I'd actually had a bad injury to my right knee. And that injury, however bad it was just totally just tore it apart surfing a local break, which is basically a really steep, kind of crazy barrel right over shallow ledge. Tore my knee completely apart at 16, 977. They didn't know what doctors didn't look at surfers as anyone would do that. So they just said, I remember seeing this orthopedic specialist with a bow tie on, by mind you, and eventually I didn't really trust anyone with a bow tie on, but he just looked at me and I had it bandaged and I think it just completely dislocated. I knew something was really bad wrong with it, but he said, I was 16, whatever, he was the Messiah. Whatever you say goes. He goes, I didn't even examine it. He just looked over the big desk and went, well, keep it wrapped, Sonny, and take these. My nurse will measure you for crutches and you'll be okay in about 6 weeks. But that injury, it was a horrible injury. It took me about 4 years until I got into surgery. But what it did is it taught me how to rehabilitate. And that got me into sort of starting to work out in other areas of my body, and seeing that other sports people actually prepared to do their sport, such footballers, tennis players, how much time they spent doing what they were doing on the court, and other pursuits such as ballet and things like that, just as a kind of a precursor, and even looked at Formula One drivers and how much they drove the car around the track. I was like, wow. I mean, us surfers, we've got a long way to go at that time. So I started to implement a training program in 1980. Well, it was pretty much 1980, and I went on to 1981, I should say, and then started to get more and more into it, 1982, 1983, and my levels of surfing got better, and I was more focused and more disciplined, and all the results started to come just naturally of me putting it in there.
Yeah. So was that a thing in the sport at the time, or fitness and that regimes for when you're not in the waves? Were other surfers doing that, or were you just kind of a lone wolf on that one?
There was some crew doing various forms, but it wasn't. I was trying to be specific and strengthen legs, strengthen core, and it was a lot of aerobic kind of style activity to sort of lift my aerobic capacity for paddling, so the recovery was quicker. But it was also doing lots and lots of surfing in surf that I didn't really want to surf because a lot of the competitions were held in very marginal conditions. Yeah. So I had to learn how to surf small surf. I had to work on things that I wasn't very good at. So and that was a real, I was doing 6 hours of surfing, 6 hours of surfing a day in pretty bad surf 5 days a week, so I could get myself in good condition for that stuff. But yeah, that was a big time of change in the sport and just application of being an athlete in the 80s.
Yeah. So so when did you know that you had a chance at being a champion? You're like, was there a moment in your career where you went, oh shit, I can win a world championship, or shit, I can, I can be really good at this?
Totally. Yeah. There's a moment. There's kind of moments where you're kind of sniffing, like, even in an event, just one single event, when I just wanted to win one event. Just that was my goal. I wanted to get through to the quarters, and then I wanted to get through to the semis. I kind of did it step by step like this. I wasn't like 10 years before that going, oh, I'm going to be world champion. No way. It was not like that for me. I definitely wanted to be really as good as I could possibly be on the wave, and I thoroughly enjoyed doing that. But when it came down to the various pressures of putting myself on the line to step up to the plate, that took a bit of getting used to, and also the nerves running through the body, the strain of sort of putting yourself, and just the leap of faith stuff that you kind of tend to do in situations, and trust yourself. That took a little bit of time, but I think it was about winning a few events and competing against my heroes and beating them. Those moments were solidifying the confidence, like building the confidence gradually. And through 1981, 82, I started to do this, and then into, not that I hadn't had some success before that, but it was all those little successes that got me to that. And then around about, I did all that training to coming into the closing end of the 1983-84 season, where Mark Richards had won the last 4 world titles. And I beat him at Sunset Beach in my first tour win, and that was in 1982 in December. So that was a really big thing for me, to beat Mark Richards on the back. I was riding with my back to the wave, which is particularly seen back then, particularly as being kind of more difficult. But for me, I loved it, so it didn't really matter. But I wanted to be the first one to win at Sunset on the backside. And so that was one motivator, a big motivator. But to beat Mark Richards in the final and him say, oh, look out for Tom Carroll next year, that was, for me, that was a kind of like, okay, I can.
Gave you permission.
Gave me permission to go for it. But I still didn't know. You just got to go out there. And there was a lot of ups and downs in that year to come with myself emotionally, in the ride, the big roller coaster ride of winning and losing, and the pressure, not dealing with it too well, and then dealing with it better, and just getting a little bit better and just keep aiming up. and then putting the training into, and then refining my training for the small waves particularly, and really aiming it towards a particular kind of events that were coming up, and spending 2 months solid preparation for those events just gave me such an incredible edge when I came to those events over all my other competitors, that I went on a winning streak of about 3 events in a row. So it was a big end of that year for me. And then the final event, I actually lost the final to Shane Horan, but I'd won the 3 events before that.
Yeah.
So that was a big winning streak for me at that time.
So were you always comfortable in big waves? Because, obviously to be the best in the world, you've got to compete in Hawaii, and Hawaii is the benchmark, and Pipeline's, the number one competition, and, considered the wave in the world that you've got to prove yourself. And, I actually watched a video of you last night where Kelly Slater was saying that you were the, greatest ever at Pipeline. And it's probably the case because you kind of changed the game in terms of how people surfed at Pipeline. So you were a lot more dynamic and had a lot more, some of those maneuvers you're doing, the snap under the lip, like on my poster, was like, like people hadn't been doing that before and put themselves in such critical positions and deep barrels. And so were you always comfortable with that? Or did you have fear when you were going out in those sessions, or what was it like?
There's always Pipeline's heavy, it's like, there's always a sense of you got to give it respect. It's like, she's a lot of energy. She's got a lot of energy, and but I kind of reveled in that energy, particularly. I would not say that I would be like that now, but back then I really reveled in that energy. But that was, I really wanted to surf Hawaii as if it was like my home break. That's how I liked the idea of that. And so I wanted to, I guess I was a bit more of a person that liked to attack the wave. So, I'm a little guy. I'm only like 5'5". I'm a tiny guy, but my body's good. It was strong, and I could get a lot out of it. There's power to weight ratio is pretty good, and so I could use that in order to, get the best out of my surfboards and also the wave. And I just love the feeling of that power. Once I got in there, broke the ice with it. So sure, on the beach there's a bit of apprehension. You can look and trying to figure out what the conditions are doing, and Pipeline's very imposing, just sort of standing on the beach and watching it break at 10 feet, very imposing and intimidating break. But once we get out there and in amongst it, when I found myself kind of more comfortable with it, that I know that I could get over the hump of myself, that I could paddle out there, take the smaller one, just work my way into the lineup, and then go for something that's significant. If I come off, that's fine. Quite often I would. It's not. It wasn't a matter of I've got to make this wave perfectly. I've got to do this perfectly. I always went for just getting myself, get myself pounded. Sometimes, it's okay, but it probably didn't work in my favour a few times when I got injured. But because I'd throw myself into it a lot, a little bit recklessly sometimes, but. You got to take a risk, and when it came to Pipeline, it was calculated as best I possibly could with the risk, but I'd engage with my adrenaline. My adrenaline I loved the adrenaline, and I'd feel at ease with it. After a little while, I'd surf there for hours at a time to get myself sorted with it.
And there's one really iconic moment of you winning at Pipeline. I think is it 87 and 87 when, and it was, if I've got the story right, it was the day after your sister passed away. Do you mind sharing that story with us?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, no, that was a real. It's an incredible day that because a lot of the times when we're, with, particularly at that point, I really wanted to get a pipeline masters. I knew that I was going to get one. I'd already won at Sunset Beach, which is a right-hander. For those who don't understand, I've got my back to the wave. Pipeline, when it's real big left at pipeline, and look at my face to the wave, I feel, I can get in the wave easier than the backside. But I really wanted to win at pipeline, and I felt good there. I had the right boards and so on, and then I was getting myself prepped to do it. And then the night before, what looked like to be the first day of competition, we didn't know yet because of the conditions had been so bad. It had been raining. There was a lot of mud in the water. It was really just 6 weeks of rain, just about. It was just full tilt, and you get caught in the middle of the Pacific on those Hawaiian Islands, and you're caught in a loop with the weather. You can get doused with rain pretty hard, and that's what had been happening. And then that evening before, my brother called me and let me know that our sister had passed away in a car accident, and it was just a huge shock, to the system. It wasn't, and I just couldn't. It took me a bit to register, and I thought, I'm coming home. I'm coming up. Don't worry about this contest. I'm surfing this pipe. I'm coming home to be with the family and so on. And then I got on the phone to my father, and he said, "Look, you should stay there because I think Joe would like you to win the pipe." And I just, I kind of went against my feelings. I've got to get on the flight. I'm over this contest. Don't worry about that. But he kind of, in those words, he said it so well, and he man, a few words, but very direct, my father. And the way he said it, it sort of said, right, stay there or win it for Joe, And so I woke up the next morning, in this state of kind of grief and so on, and a kind of almost a little detached feelings, and the conditions had changed all of a sudden, and there was a new swell, a beautiful west swell, just perfect for pipeline, and it was marching in, and there was no wind. The rain was starting to dissipate. So the first time for weeks, the actual sky was starting to clear, and there's this swell, its pipeline is on, almost, whoa, and it was surreal because of my state of mind. I was going, oh wow, I'm going straight out for a warm up. I could feel it in the air when I woke up early that morning. So I went out with a buddy, and we paddled into the break for a practice, kind of as the sun was just a little bit before coming up. And I could feel this stillness in the air, but this powerful swell. I was going, wow, we've paddled in behind the break from way up the beach, completely different than I'd ever normally paddle out pipeline. Usually I'll look at it for a while, watching from the front, see what's going on. This time I didn't look at it at all. I was paddling in from the back. And it was 10 feet, and it was just heaving. And I paddled in from behind it. And this time I wore a helmet. I've been thinking about it for about 3 years or so, that, a friend who got a brain injury from hitting his head at pipeline in 1984, who was a really talkative and happy guy, and really just a really upbeat guy, nice person to be with, surfing, and back in the late 70s, early 80s, surfing in Hawaii wasn't always a happy experience in the water with people. But he was always upbeat, and he had he had to get medevac, and it was during the Pipeline Masters in 1984. And then he comes back about a year later. I get to see him a year later in Hawaii, and I go up to see him, and it's in the water, and he's wearing an orange helmet. And I go, hey, Beaver, how you going, mate? You know, his name's Beaver. And he goes, Beaver, how you going? He goes, and he's like looking at me like, we knew each other for years through the late 70s and early 80s. And he's just he wasn't registering. He was a different person. And I go, wow. And it shocked me at that point. I'm going, at some point, if I want to go deeper pipeline, I need to wear a helmet. I don't want to end up like that. And it was sad to see that. So I finally got myself a helmet. I've paddled into the lineup for a practice session with all this stuff going on that seemed to sort of set a stage that I'd never felt at Pipeline, that I wasn't bothered by anyone else or the event. The event didn't have this hold other than winning, possibly. And I was going for it today. I was just going for it. I was going to go deeper than I'd ever done before. I was going to use this helmet against the reef. I needed to. And it just seemed to set the stage. And even today, when I see someone in a competition, you know, or they're playing for a bigger reason, they're actually putting themselves on the line for a bigger reason, I go, watch out. Human potential is big.
Do you think that there's something do you think that there's something you can replicate, like that level of capacity to put yourself into those flow states?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't think the mind can actually do that. Yeah. I think the mind there's too much going on for the mind. Yeah. It's really, flow state's about not being in the mind. Flow state's really about being completely and utterly present with what's going on, and the mind doesn't really go for that. So the mind's always trying to jump forward, jump back, make up stories, carry on like a peanut. So I was like, during those moments competing, I was emptied of the experience of being myself. So I was actually able to just concentrate. I was just being able to paddle for waves that I didn't even see, and I knew the wave behind. I was connected to my intuition at a level that I'd never experienced at Pipeline before. So that set me up really well for the win.
Yeah, and at that time, nobody actually knew about your sister. You hadn't told anybody, right? Yeah. No,
it's a super private thing, I felt. You know, it's like those close to me knew. That's all it needs to know. You know, by the end of the day, a lot of people knew, but I didn't. I wasn't also adept at 26 at really communicating. I just didn't have that ability to communicate like I do now. I've kind of evolved somewhat, but you know, I think the 26, I didn't know what to do with all these emotions that came up. Winning the event for Joe was fantastic. Like, it gave me a lot of. It felt great, but it still, you know, when I got back after the event and back to where I was living, I had to kind of let off this, all this tension inside me. I had to let off steam, and it wasn't the healthiest thing to do, I don't think, at that time, the way I did it. And, I just didn't know. That's the way it was. You know, you don't know what you don't know.
So, I mean, this might be a good segue to the drug addiction. You did a 60 minutes did a story on you in Australia, I think, back in 2013 or something, where they covered some of the addiction, etc., and where it all started for you. But did the drugs start whilst you were competing, like all through all that period, or was it just recreational, or like just for fun? Like, was that really in the culture of surfing?
Yeah, like, it's all like, it was pretty much laid out, like you could say yes or no, but if you're in a social situation, just like all of us, we don't actually make our really own decisions, like, in many different ways. Like, you going with a collective, you're kind of like, oh yeah, this is fun, yeah, I'll try that, yeah, and the next minute you kind of, oh, well, that's a different feeling. You're going for experience. So I was up for and open to experiences, new experiences, and I kind of still am. I'm not saying that I'm not, up for those kind of experiences, but I think now I've learnt where I go with it. But that was it was everywhere, like especially in the 80s. The 80s was kind of pumping with partying and and then you'd celebrate. I would celebrate after a good year of competition, or sometimes maybe after a competition I would, and that'd be a bit of a roller coaster ride with all that. And that started happening more towards like the late 80s and 90s. But you just get a little taste of it. You don't think you're going to be some people get addicted to things pretty quick. For me, it was more slow, but I did like being above the line, like energy-wise. Like I said, I like the adrenaline, and someone who likes the adrenaline is going to like that feeling of being up. And if you're just a little bit above the line, or a lot above the line, but and also the cocaine is like it's an ego drug. Like it is just, when you're on cocaine, you're just like, you're the man. You can say anything you want. You get all this confidence. You're thinking you're killing it until it runs out. And then you're kind of, oh shit, you just crawl back into this little sort of remnant part of yourself that still remains, that's sort of going, oh my God, what was that all about? What did I just say? So it's, there's, I took that route to kind of all these different lengths, and sometimes knew early on that, oh man, I like this a lot more than that person did. And that person has stopped, and I kind of, all I want to do is keep going. Like I was just like, I didn't have an off switch. So when we kind of realize that, I don't have an off switch. I'm like going to punch the ceiling with this one. So
do you think that same personality trait, or that same kind of addictive personality, or whatever that thing is that, caused you to push those boundaries, is that the same thing that made you a really great competitor and like push hard in surfing? You see it with geniuses and musicians and artists and creative people all the time, that those things seem to be somehow inherently linked, right? Was that how did that affect your surfing? And, did it make you better? Did it make you worse? Did it not affect it at all?
Okay, so when we're on a really clear mission and we've got a set of really kind of set goals, and we've got some steps we can make towards it, and we're working towards this goal, and things are pretty sort of much, their movement towards this goal are pretty much they're fairly clear. They're pretty clear, There's some things you want to do, and then the single-minded focus to get really good at something will create that kind of part of the mind that is what we call obsessive, I guess. You have to be single-minded, focused, but we kind of, at that point, when it's working for us, and that's all you think you are. If you haven't brought it into your life that that's not all I am. If you think that's all you are, and that's what I thought I was, that's all I am. You put everything you have. Well, I put everything I had into it, and that's how I knew myself at that time. This relationship with myself was that, and so this is like, the top here is the tipping point, where things are that character trait within me, which is what you might want to call the addict, works for us. I'm addicted to surfing, and I'm getting really good at it. I don't know it, but it's feeling really damn good. I'm really getting a lot of really good results, and getting affirmed for doing it. So I'm just going to get better and better and better, more focused, more better, much better and much better, against all the feelings I may have about anything. I'm just going for it. And then all of a sudden I hit this amazing tipping point, which I don't really see. Mine can't see it. But there's a tipping point where it's working for you. We're working for us. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with being an addict. There's absolutely nothing. Everyone's got it. Everyone's got it. I'm guaranteed there's a seed of it in every one of us. The seed's been planted and it's grown. It's got to this point and it's working for my life. It was working for me, and then all of a sudden, tipping point where it starts working against us. I get introduced to something that kind of replicates the feeling. A drug that actually replicates the feeling. I don't have to do anything. I just take the drug. I'm killing it. I'm gone. Yeah, it's a trick. This is a very tricky moment for someone just like me. And so, even if it's just a little bit at first, and there's this, I don't know, and life takes a few, turns for, you call them, they're just life events that start to happen that are very, very challenging, and I'm not ready to take it on because I haven't really grown past the surfer guy, right? The world champion guy. Haven't grown past it yet. We need to kind of develop that other part of us that's actually not.
So that was what you were always trying to replicate through drug use, is that feeling of being a champion.
Well, I just don't know whether that's it, but the type of drug that I liked was something that kept me above the line, that kept me engaged. I love being engaged. I like the energy. I like the feeling of being engaged with people and things and what I'm doing. And I like to kind of have that performance angle. Not that cocaine's a great performance-enhancing drug. It's kind of useless for that for me, but for some people it might be in other areas. But it's a particularly dangerous drug if we start to just overdo it and then get that feeling, because you're just going to come down off it, and you have to go back and get, and then you'll be searching in your mind, some part of our mind, if we thought, no, I've done, I'm okay, I'm not going to touch it for a while. And some people can do that, and I did that for quite some time, but at some point where my life took a few turns which I wasn't ready for, it became a place it would change its nature. The addict inside us is very broad-minded. It's as broad-minded and as entity as I've ever met in my whole life. So when it'll just recreate itself into another form and just go, okay, well, I'm going to use that to escape what the reality is. And that's very often the case for us as humans. Humans having a human experience, we kind of reality is a little bit too much. And
so I assume that you weren't meditating back then. You hadn't discovered that side of you. And so when and where did meditation come in?
In recovery.
Yeah.
Right on that point of falling into recovery and surrendering to a path of recovery. If it was me, the addict, I would not be in recovery. But all my bright ideas at that point, at the end of coming towards the end of my active addiction, every thought was becomes quite destructive. And there's no gap because I'm so compulsive, and I'm just going on whatever. I'm just driven by this wild kind of desire to escape myself and be outside my body all the time, no matter what. And I could swap the witch for the bitch, they call it. I could go from using any kind of drug. Like, not that I went and ventured to opiates. I didn't get to that point, but that was coming. And it's all on the table. I don't know what's happening tomorrow. Right now, I'm in recovery. I feel really good, but we don't never know what's happening tomorrow. So, but falling into recovery by the help and love that was around me, not by my good thinking. I didn't go, putting myself up to go to rehab, or I want to go to 12-step meetings. There was none of that. I was like trying to avoid everyone, trying to get away from anyone. Couldn't tell the truth if I tried. So falling into recovery, coming into seeing what these beautiful, divinely written out path to recovery through the 12-step program. On the 11th step, it said, sought through prayer. We sought we sought through prayer and meditation. I was just talking about it before. I can't believe it. We sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with the God of our understanding, praying only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry it out. Now, that's a little bit Christian-based because we're talking about a Christian God there. We don't need to do that.
Yeah.
It's prayer. Prayer itself doesn't need to have to go to anything else but the universe itself or great outdoors, God. Good orderly direction, God.
Yeah.
But these concepts you can make. I don't know. You could make these glasses your God. You'd make this thing your God. But as long as it's not me, making up my thing, but I can use prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact. And so I went, oh my God, so meditation. And then I heard through people in recovery, many, many years of recovery who are meditating regularly, and they all advised that they suggested it's a good idea, Tom, because try to tell me anything at that point, I was out. So it was a suggestion. The suggestion sort of landed on me. I finally had to go to treatment for 5 weeks. I was in there for 6 weeks, in 2006. December 18, 2006, I fell into rehab, and that was when I started to take on the idea of meditation. I was crazy. I was full of just crazy thoughts. I was attached to every thought that came along. As soon as I think something, I thought I was that. Anything could happen.
What did the meditation give you access to?
So what happens with meditation, and we do this regularly, if you put it in our lives regularly, just like going to the toilet, right? So we give ourselves this practice, and it's nice to get a personal instruction on it, but there's many different ways of meditating. But the one I started to do was a breath-based Tibetan Buddhist style meditation. And there was no timing. I wouldn't put a timer on. I just sort of sit but the first actually one I got was a disc with a guided meditation on it. That kind of got me in a rhythm, and I committed myself to every morning, and I'd wake myself up with an alarm and get up a bit earlier than everyone else in the treatment centre and do this 15 minutes guided meditation just to kick me off. I didn't know where I was going to go. I just trusted that this is probably the best start I can get to. This started to bring a feeling that I was connecting to myself. I then I knew that I at some point needed to go to stillness in myself without any guiding, and that no music, no nothing, just experiencing with myself, because I'd had a few talks with some friends who'd done it for many years. They said, sitting in silence is the key here, and using the breath to access that part of the deeper part of ourselves. So, and come to the practice just regularly, no matter whether you got ADHD or not. I remember one guy said, you got ADHD or whatever you got, doesn't matter. Just get up and sit and put yourself aside and let God in. I mean, so it was kind of, that made sense. And I didn't like the word God at first. It definitely wasn't something for me. But over time, it started to make sense. But down the track, I was told that you will create this gap between your first thought and action. So, and I was going, whoa, I wonder what that's going to be like, because all I could do is, I was thinking, I just thoughts, and I could just do anything. And I was unpredictable. I didn't know which way I was going to go, particularly if it meant coming out of rehab, the first day out of rehab, and going straight to the dealer to score again. I mean, that was on the cards. Like, I don't know. That's addicts do that. So alcoholics, whoever we are, gamblers, sex addiction, all this addict, gluey, stickiness to that first thought. And we're gone. We're lost. We may never come back. So the cool thing about meditation, it started to bring the results within a couple of months of practice that I could actually sit for the first time in my life for longer than a few seconds on a chair and actually listen and actually come into my breath and notice. It was back then I was counting the breaths, just on the exhalation, counting 1, 2, and I might be able to get to sort of 3, thinking I'm going to get to 10. If you get to 10, you're killing it. So, and then return back to 1. So that was how it was. There was no goal. We're not going for any goal. We're not trying to achieve. So it was just sitting to practice, being regular. And this started to get me this gap. I started to be able to see, oh my God, this is what I wanted to do in this situation. This is how, and that's that conscious gap, consciousness growing, which is, I think, miraculous. And there's no way I could think my way to that. Mind can't think its way to do that.
Yeah. So has that kind of seeped into all areas of your life now? Because I mean, you sound like a pretty grounded kind of dude, and I mean, I know for myself, meditation and daily practices has kind of led me to be present as much as possible throughout the day, and whatever I'm doing, having some mindfulness about how I'm doing something, how I'm, how I'm preparing my coffee, or how I'm, sitting there and doing my work, and having that kind of sacred approach to living life. So has that been something that has been true for you?
Yeah, you nailed it. It's really, I'm pretty sort of wish-washy guy. Like I know there's a big wish-washy, happy-go-lucky, like let's have fun, whatever kind of guy. Like I'm not, and I'm quite light-hearted in that area, but there's also a side of me that's quite heavy-hearted and can get sort of a little bit hard on myself. So meditation brings my awareness up, just charges the awareness up to become more present with whatever's going on. I get more of a chance of being present with you when I'm doing regular practice. And that transforms my life, the people around me, the people who rely on me, the people, it just a ripple effect is transformative for people around me. So I don't want to, I can never tell someone to do it. It's all about being exemplary and being someone who is here right now. I'm able to sort of, I'm not saying there's no way. Like, I'm still that kid, who will just drop everything in a hat to go surfing. I'm still like that. I'm like, oh my God, the surf's good. And I'm like distracted. If I've got to concentrate on something and the surf's good, or something's going on, like I really want to engage, to actually, okay, pull yourself back, be present.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
I still like that. I'm like, there's a lot of stuff, it's only, I've been meditating daily for, I can't believe it, it's almost 14 years. So that has just blown me away that I'd actually, when I say that, I can't believe it. But one day at a time, this is absolutely available to us all. So, and making it my first preference has been the key.
I mean, I've not met anybody who has a regular practice of meditation that says it hasn't been the number one thing that has transformed their life or kept them grounded or created better relationships, got them clear on what they want to do in their life, etc. It's, and so you're actually teaching this to people now. I noticed on your Instagram that you do, I think, weekly lives. You're there with the birds in the morning, you're out on the balcony, and so you're kind of letting people in on those meditation journeys as well, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, we do that 3 days a week, and I started off at the beginning of the kind of lockdown here in Sydney. We came in, the pandemic kind of, there was a bit of a gush on that, or at the end of March, and I thought, wow, this is kind of a cool time to give people the feeling of meditation if they kind of needed it, because it was I could feel the collective stress levels kind of rise. And so why not put it on Instagram Live and see if people want to take it up? And I did 5 minutes every morning for a 30-day period. That's how I started. I thought, okay, I'll do it 5 minutes every morning. I'll give them the stage one, what I call stage one meditation practice, breath-based. And so as opposed to what I practice is a mantra-based, the Vedic technique. So I give that in the teaching, and which is a beautiful, beautiful practice. But the breath is fine. It'll bring us in, and it'll get us an experience of ourselves in a least excited state, and that's where we're moving towards, just to transcend the constant thinking mind, which is, if at any time in this history, it's got us right now. And I thought back then, give people that 5 minute chance to come to it, because 5 minutes is a long time if you've never meditated. Then after 30 days, I thought I'm going to step it up to 10 minutes. So if you're on, you want to keep coming. People kept coming in. They were getting results even on 5 minutes, and they'll stick. Some people are sticking with it. Some people are still with me today. It's pretty cool. Yeah. on the IG lives. And then it got after 60 days, I put it over to 3 mornings a week: Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday morning, Australian Eastern Daylight Time now, at 5:50 a.m. And I just join in, and then we start meditating for 15 minutes now, 3 times a week. So I've got some real regulars through that, and it's been lovely sharing experiences and hearing people's stories as a result of actually putting this thing in our life that's absolutely it opposes the mind. The mind goes, what do you mean? Do nothing. Sit there, what? Close your eyes and what? There's things going on. I've got to go and do stuff. I've got big things to do. Yeah, so the mind, you got to sidestep the mind a little bit on that one. And when we sit and actually practice, we give ourselves
why do you think it's so? Why do you think it's so hard
for us to come back to being?
Why do you think it's so hard for us to sit still and be with our own
we
thoughts?
We've got these things going on. This one's a big one.
Yeah.
This thing's big. We've got this. This is really stirring the pot on the addictive mind. It's built around, and it looks like a poker machine. And we know what poker machines do to people. It's pretty sad, in fact. Seems like good fun. Let's go and throw a couple of dollars in the poker machine. And then all of a sudden you see people, they can't get off those things. They think they're going to win something. It ticks off something in the brain. It gets a little dopamine hit. It's all chemical in the brain, just going, I almost won. I almost got something. I better put the rest of my money in it. The same thing with gambling addiction. It's very tricky on the mind. So, and when we think about it, we're at a heightened active mind state today with various stresses. So probably more than any other time in human history, we're trying to cope, right? Because we've got all this idea of achievement, social, cultural, familial narratives. You've got to be this, you've got to be that, you've got to be this, you've got to be that, and all this imagery coming at us 1,000 miles an hour. Competition to get your attention, to draw your attention in. So then we're kind of, once they've got us, so you go down the YouTube rabbit hole, you go down the well, you see it now. It's pretty full on. You've got the gaming rabbit hole. You've got these deep cavernous sort of spaces. It appears that way, that are taking our attention completely, and we just forget that we're human beings. So when we sit for meditation, we sit to get an experience of ourselves as a human being. We just get a little touch on that. And when we come out of meditation, everyone goes, oh, wow, that was amazing. Wow. Oh, now everyone's really still. You do it in a group, and everyone's like standing there, wow. Oh, I don't know where I went, like, wow, I was all over the place. Where was I? But the cool thing is, we actually get an experience, and we do this regularly, and it just starts to grow. That sort of space starts to grow in us. We sort of get this, that's our human, it's us being. We're a human being. And that starts to grow, that sense. We're not a human doing. That's where we get lost in the doing. So, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. We just come back, get experience with ourselves as a human being regularly. We just get to live in a little bit more coherence around that, doing stuff. But, I can get caught up in doing. I can get caught up in it. So I'm just a human doing it, but doing. But I need that space. I know for myself that I'm a much better human being as a result.
Yeah, and I think, what you're alluding to is just, when we're not doing meditation, that addiction that we have to the information is so subtle. We're just not aware of it. It's there, but the very thing that we're seeking through, what we're trying to achieve through this thing is that connection. Like we're getting this tiny, tiny, subtle, micro, unconscious moments of that, and we don't really know what that is. And then when you have these, when we get that empowerment for ourselves to create that from ourselves, and we don't need anything external, that's great power. That's, great access to understanding. And then we can start to be aware of how we're interacting with these things and start to become more conscious about it and turn it off before bed and not turn it on in the morning and, all that kind of thing. So,
well, you can see the extreme, being kind of extreme by nature myself, that if I got on those gaming consoles, like I don't get onto that. I never really got onto them, but maybe I played Space Invaders back in the in the late 70s and 80s. But for a young mind to get locked into gaming consoles now, they're built to lock you in, no matter whether they can't. So you can't tell what time of day it is. So and how long, I don't know. They're built now so they're continuous. They don't say stop. You've won this and there's your score. Do you want to play again? They don't even ask anymore.
Yeah.
They just go roll it over. And so you can get to the point where, you forget that you're a human being.
Yeah.
You've completely, I would forget that I was a human. I want to play 24/7. There's stories of people, like getting pizza delivery, putting on like 20, 30 pound of weight in 6 weeks and not seeing the light of day and going to the toilet in bags. Like, this is actually a human completely forgetting that they're a human being.
Yeah.
So no one else matters. It's just a game console. So it's a very tricky time for humanity, and the stress levels that come along, we want to escape. So I think, it's a tricky time, and meditation is a great antidote to, and nature, just nature, being in nature if you can.
Yeah, those two things are inherently linked, because that meditation is bringing us back to our nature, which connects us. Yeah, it's really powerful. I've got a couple more questions for you. So, you've done some business over the years. Like, there's a Tom Carroll businessman. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Like I've had a few involvement partnerships and so on. And it's been I've been involved with Quicksilver since I was 14. I'm still involved with Quicksilver, but not from a business point of view, but just as there is business there. They contract me, but as far as building a business, we built a business through the 1990s through to early 2000s. With Quicksilver, we built up licensees with making wetsuits and accessories and doing retail stores in Europe and so on. We, with several other partners, but two in particular. So, and that was a big journey. And I did okay at that. That was cool. I also kind of made me a bit shy on the business. After that, building business. I do have a stand-up paddleboard brand, which I love doing it, but I haven't focused my energies that much on it in the last 2 years. Did pretty good with it. And that was really cool. Still got that going. But it's just sort of thinned it out due to the way the market is. Keeping that watching that space. Also get involved with doing surfboards, and also use my name. And you do my name as a business.
You do some speaking as well, like you speak at leadership events and stuff like that. What kind of stuff are you talking about? Are you talking about overcoming those addictions and meditation, or what kind of things are you talking about?
Usually about overcoming adversity in general. I may bring in some of my story around that, but it's about the mindset of overcoming adversity. I think, and certain tools that I've used to get there, and one of them is definitely meditation. But and I just tell them quite a bit about various parts of my story. I brought a book out with my brother, who wrote it, and I use parts of that book to highlight some of those stories. But it's nice to connect with people at that level. It's really good, and seeing people kind of light up and.
Yeah, I think what's cool is, for somebody like yourself, to hear these stories and to hear about meditation and stuff from, like you said, you're just an average, you're just a guy, you're just a surfer guy, to coming from that world, because quite often, we see gurus and it's like, we learn meditation from people that have been living in ashrams and stuff like this. But I think there's something really to be said from learning it from an Aussie surfer guy, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So it really is. You're really your own guru. Gurus really mean, that someone's got the light and they're just shining the light, and you get attracted by the light. So, and then you can be offered the light. So, and then you can become your own. You can become the light. So, it's the Western idea of guru is pretty tricky, because we're kind of ego based and very egocentric, and we'll latch on to something to support a kind of a idea that I've got to be better than someone.
Which then creates the separation and telling ourselves we're not good enough. Yeah,
and it supports the unworthiness.
Yeah,
that's inside us. We all got a sense of that. So, but particularly in our culture, unworthiness is a very, very strong thread.
Especially in Australia, I think, because of the tall poppy syndrome, and I mean that's a real thing. Doing something well and being cut down by people, and It's a real thing.
I think it has two-edged sword, like the tall poppy thing. There was something really quite like you're just my mate, like just come on now, stop, like thinking you're like a big wig, But to get really good and become a world champion surfer, I had to really break out of that myself, my own experience with it.
Yeah,
I really needed to sort of really challenge the tall poppy that's within me of wanting someone to be at my level. Let's all be at the same level. Let's hang on a sec. Just keep it at the same level here. Yeah, you're not better than anyone else, all right? So at some level, I think it was pretty good, but then it gets too much and we don't get to actually extend our talents, but the unworthiness, the sense of being unworthy can be triggered in an environment very strongly.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, this has been super insightful. Thank you so much for being so gracious with your time and your stories. I really appreciate it. I'm going to make sure everybody's got the links to come and check out your meditations, and the book you mentioned, I think, is called TC.
That's right.
Yeah,
TC,
and people can get it in a book form and audio book, I'm assuming, as well.
We don't have audio book, which is a bit of a bummer. We should push that out. We do have. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it. On various book sites.
Cool. Very cool. So, guys, make sure you go check out Tom and his stuff. But one last question for you: if you had the one-time superpower of mental telepathy, and you could connect one short message with all of humanity, all 7.8 billion people, or whatever the number is now, one short message that you could connect with everybody, what would that message be?
Hold it lightly. So hold this lightly.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, it sounds very simple in the way it's delivered, but there's a lot of that's profound. So yeah.
We just all kind of loaded up with. We're all loaded up with I know through this.
Yeah.
I know. Now I got the answer. Yeah. So you better just come. Just you know that I know. Then it gets really heavy and there's no fun involved in that. There's no joy, really.
Yeah. And then we take ourselves so seriously and expect so much out of ourselves, and it's impossible to live into.
Yeah, just wear it lightly.
Yeah. All right, Tom Carroll, thank you so much. Before you go, I want to get a photo. We're just going to do this live. Can you take some photos? So what I want you to do is just do a bit of a shucker on the, to the camera. Hang on, just give us 1 second. We normally wait until the end of the recording and do this, but I want to do this on the recording just for something different because it's Tom Carroll. So.
Sure. Yeah. No worries.
All right. Awesome. Tom Carroll, thank you so much.
Monty.
Awesome. Guys, make sure you go check out Tom, check out the book, and I'll see you guys next time back down the rabbit hole.